Welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelley Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today, we are excited to welcome Sandra Tigerlind to the show. Sandra Tigerlind is a dog behaviorist, dog trainer, and enrichment specialist from Sweden who has worked full-time with dogs for the past 13 years. She specializes in fearful, insecure, and traumatized dogs and has a soft spot for adopted or rehomed dogs. So much so that she started the first and only dog sanctuary in the country that focuses mostly on the dogs that usually never get a family, like senior dogs, special needs dogs, or traumatized dogs. It is both a passion and a way of life to see the dogs that are the most vulnerable and yet unwanted find their way to the sanctuary, living safe and loved until their last breath. When the war started in Ukraine and the emergency for animals in war zones became apparent, Sandra was instantly determined to help in some way. Now the 10th aid relief journey is ahead, and the suffering animals have received more than 20 tons of food, thousands of doses of pain medication, carriers for refugees with animals, and a lot more, all thanks to devoted followers and animal lovers like yourselves. Our charity, Black Dog Foundation, also rescued and found new loving homes in Sweden for around 30 dogs. Of course, the majority were seniors close to heart. Running the sanctuary is a full-time commitment, but even so, we made time and space for 10 trips for the suffering in Ukraine. We have learned a lot during this heartbreaking year. Our motto has always been, it is never too late for love. And as a trainer, Sandra's mindset is empathy is key. And here we are, combining it all with our love and empathy for animals and dog owners alike across the borders. Welcome, Sandra. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you today. And just so our listeners know, I want to let them know that this is going to be kind of a special show. Well, not kind of a special show. It's going to be definitely a special show, as they all are, but it'll be a little bit different from most of our shows in that we're just going to focus primarily on one topic today. And that's the work that you're doing in rescue, and more specifically, the work that you've been doing assisting and rescuing dogs from Ukraine and dogs who are in Ukraine over the past year. So I hope that you'll be willing to get us started out today, Sandra, by maybe telling us just a little bit about the amazing work that you are already doing in rescue and the sanctuary that you have, and how you built on what you're doing there to start helping the people and animals in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I started out like working actually with a dog daycare for many years ago. And already back then, it was quite unusual in Sweden to have dogs in a pack. They were usually sitting in boxes like one by one. And when I was putting my own dog somewhere when I got a job, I was like, there's no place here in this city where my dogs would be like confident or calm or like any place that they would actually like to be at when I was at work. So I started like one of Sweden's first dog pack daycares. and that sort of like followed me through everything. That like I like to prove people wrong, and I always like to like put the dog's needs first, like above what's well maybe what's more good for the owners or for the convenience of the families. Like just try to combine them. So it was like a interesting thing to start out with when I was starting working with dogs. And after some years, I adopted my own first dog from the dog meat trade in Thailand. So he was a three-legged dog, which is where he was, and it's still quite unusual here in Sweden. And after I've been there, I was volunteering at the big shelter, and I was just like feeling that I have to do something more. Like I cannot just watch suffering and like go home to Sweden, which is one of the safest countries in the world. We have great like animal welfare laws, and I just felt like okay, we need to do some more. And you could kind of say that the suffering in Sweden is quite low compared to many other countries for dogs. I mean, we do have our issues, but it's not like in the same level. So I actually sold my dog daycare and I bought myself a little house in the countryside, and I started my own dog sanctuary. And basically, I was just looking at the dogs that probably will never would find their own home. So my first three dogs, one was blind, one was three-legged, and the third was traumatized. So she never left the kennel, and she was like, I've never met a dog like her in my entire life. So thinking about like what kind of choices I made, I came back with her and I realized like I have no clue what I'm doing. This is not what they teach you at puppy class, like how to deal with a traumatized dog. So I kind of like started to educate myself in like pretty much everything you can when it comes to dogs. So gladly, the world now is more like international, so I can learn from people in the America or Spain or UK or anything. So that's what's great with a community that's worldwide and like pods like this and everything. So basically that's how I started to become like a behaviorist and took on like maybe harder and harder dogs all the time. And eventually like that turned out to be like more the senior dogs, because well, they were always the ones left out like in the end. Every shelter I was at, you know, maybe someone had a chance to get a home because even if they were blind, they were cute, they were young. So it kind of got crystallized after a while that it's the senior dogs that needs us the most. So that's why now I have like Sweden's first and only senior dog sanctuary. So that's pretty much how it started out.
That is awesome. I love hearing a little bit about your backstory and how you came to be involved in animals and animal rescue. And you said something that you said when you were somewhere else and you saw some of the hardships that dogs were going through, you said, you know, I have to do more. And I know that, or I don't know, but I wonder if you had a similar feeling when the war started in Ukraine and you started seeing things happening with animals there, that you felt you had to do more there. Was that your personality shining through, getting you involved there as well?
Yeah, I think you can kind of say that. I mean, that's also part of the community thing, that you can now like hear the suffering like across the borders. Like, so even like when the first stories came from the war, you know, there were people fleeing and like, you know, everything was just, you know, time stopped. Like, you know, everyone know like what happened on that day. Like you were just like, what is going on with the world? So obviously like it was very like a lot of hardships for the people, but then the films and the videos, like the pictures started to come across with everyone fleeing with their pets and like trying to hide them in bomb shelters and everything. And you know, we can't just sit like not feeling anything when we see animals suffering like that. And for me it's so close. Even like, I mean, it's Ukraine is not next door, but it's not many hours away from me. So I kind of had like a hard time accepting the fact that I'm just like sitting here like super safe and like cuddling my dogs, and like just a few hours by car and boat away from here, people were fleeing for their lives, and dogs, animals, cats got traumatized, and they were just like fleeing with their owners or hiding out or dying or suffering. So yeah, that's really what happened. Like, okay, we have to do something. Like, we're not there. We cannot like assist. Like, this is not our conflict, and this is definitely not the animal conflict. So I just felt like, okay, we have to do something. So that's pretty much, I was, well, you can kind of say that I'm pretty spontaneous, like normally, but I think all my family like called me and like, what are you doing? When they saw my live show, I was like, I'm going to Ukraine. And they were like, did you really think this through? I'm like, no, I did not. But I can't just watch this and like do nothing. So we just set it up like, okay, I'm gonna like leave in a week. Like, please send me all your food and medicine and everything you have at home. And I had no idea like how this would come across to people, because I was like one of the first to actually set up something for the animals. So I didn't know like, was anyone going to donate? Was anyone going to send stuff? Would I go there by myself? What would happen? But we were just like, okay, we just fix this along the way.
And so I think you mentioned that you said your family saw your live, if I understood correctly. So is that kind of how you jumped in and got started? Did you do some sort of a live on social media, just saying, I'm going to do this? Or what did you mean when you said they saw your live? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I was on Facebook, and I was just like sitting exactly where I'm sitting now on my couch, and I was like doing a live show, and I was like, okay, I have a really crazy idea, but I think we have to do this. And in a week, I'm going to Ukraine. Like, are you with me or not?
And so your family reached out because they wanted to know more, for sure. But what else happened after you did that live? People started reaching out, making donations. People wanted to come with you, or how did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, so like the response was insane, I think, like, because I think everyone was as much in shock as I was. And I started also like putting up the stories from the owners or the shelters and stuff, and people, they couldn't just like close their eyes to it. So they followed me and they followed the stories, and like in a few days I was kind of like sitting tight, like hoping that, okay, maybe we can do something. But after like a few days, I think like all of Sweden like sent me stuff. Like my mailbox was like super full every day. So people sent me notes with like, okay, like, I hope this will help with something. Like, this is from my dog, or my previous dog, or like, this is from my neighbor. And people went to the pet stores, and I went to the veterinaries, and pretty much I was like spending my time in my car and just like going places, picking up donations like in the nearby cities, and just like filling up my car like day by day by day. And that's when I kind of realized that this is insane. Like, I had no clue that it was going to be that big, but people really, really wanted to help. Like, it was a great response like the first weeks.
And were you able, either right from the start or later in your time, in your efforts to help, were you able to build on some of those connections that you have from your rescue to do that? Were people that were involved in your rescue or that you had met over the years part of helping as well?
Yeah, so pretty much the ones that followed my page, they saw it, and some of them followed like their own contacts. In much of it's Poland, because Poland is pretty much in the middle of Sweden and Ukraine. So and they also have like the most refugees there. So Poland was like a big hub for people fleeing with animals, and like for for help to like reach Ukraine, you like started in Poland. So people started to sending me like Polish contacts and like, oh, you know, this girl, she went there and she did that, or that one, this organization, they're here and they did this. And it was like sort of like even like on the trip, starting like making a puzzle of, okay, let's contact this person and see where they're going, what they need. And initially, like, you know, I'm kind of naive as well. I think like, okay, I'll just fix this along the way. And, you know, everything is not that easy. Like, well, most of it is, but I realized also like, because when I left with the stuff for the ferry, we had kind of a tight schedule. Like, okay, we're going to this place and we leave medicines at this place. We'll bring food to this place. And by the border, they need the carriers. So we had like a schedule where we needed to go and bring the stuff. And the first thing that happens is like every bit of our plans are ruined because the ferry stopped in the middle of the night saying that there's a man overboard. And the ferry stopped to search for him, which, yeah, I mean, what can you do? And I was also like doing a live podcast then, like, okay, I'm soon like there and we're gonna get like off the boat, and they just like call out like, man overboard, we have to stop. And so all of our plans were like instantly ruined because we were like 8 hours late. So basically we started all over on the ferry to like plan everything ahead. And I went alone that time. So it was like kind of a lot of pressure to just like make this happen. But yeah, we called around different places and we got in touch with like the local like animal patrol in Poland, and people by the border and stuff. And as it turned out, like I can plan a lot and I can do spontaneous stuff, but I cannot enter a war zone without planning. As we reached for the border, they said, okay, sure, you can go in, but there's like the line or the queue to get in was like 4 days, and to get out, it was like 8 days, because, you know, there was like 4 million people trying to travel to get out of the country, and there is not a lot of crossings over to Poland. So I realized that there is no chance in anywhere that I can like go into Ukraine and back, because, you know, I have a shelter of my own at home. So that was also like part of the plan, how to manage that when I'm away. And yeah, you know, everything is just like going by the flow and just find the solutions. So yeah, the first trip was kind of crazy and intense, but the help reached where it needed to be at least, and I learned a little bit about it. So yeah, I think the next were a little bit easier.
So do I understand that you said you went by yourself on that first trip? Is that
Yes.
correct? Oh wow. And so you couldn't get in. You could have, but it would have been way more than you were able to do, given your situation at home. So what did that look like? Were you able to distribute goods right there at the border then that were able to go into Ukraine? Were you still able to get help in there?
Yeah, we met up with the organizations that were driving into Ukraine, because they had done those journeys before, so they had some connections going through across the border and everything, and so they had like more. They were prepared, and I wasn't. So basically, first trips we met up with the Polish Animal Patrol and left a lot of donations to them. So when they collected enough, they just filled up a huge truck and just like went into Ukraine and distributed it into the smaller cities and to the well, in the beginning, you know, everything was not under siege, so you could reach a lot of the smaller cities, which were later like totally cut off. So everything changes. Like every journey, every trip was like a big plan just on its own. Like you couldn't do one and just like copy paste it, because the war was changing and the needs were changing, and depending on where people could go, like to the affected areas. So everything was changing trip by trip, and all of the contacts I had there, like I was like, until the day I was traveling us like, what is the need for the most stuff right now? Like, is it food? Is it medicine? Is it carriers? What is it? So I will bring the right stuff, because I think the biggest problem with people that really, really wants to help, I mean, they all have a good heart, but sometimes I think their need to help doesn't really fit like the need of the people all the time. So what happened is that many people, they drove to the border, realized that can't get in, and they just left stuff. They just emptied their cars, their trucks. So there was just like a big garbage station by the border, and even also like the stuff that they were sent to shelters or private persons. Like it's not right to do it like that, because I mean, they don't have the capacity to act as like a garbage sorter. So yeah, it was really important for me to always bring the right stuff to the right places and just like be updated at all times. So yeah, you kind of had to learn from every trip, and like just arrange everything for the current needs, and not just like, okay, we did this last time, let's do the same. So I think every trip I did was different, like with different contacts, different things, and different needs.
And so maybe share with us a little bit about those different needs and how they've evolved over the time that you've been helping there too. It sounds like at some points the need has been, and probably continues to be, for items to get into Ukraine. But has there been a need on the other side of the border as well? Then have you helped actually provide sanctuary for animals coming out of Ukraine, or helping people who are coming out of Ukraine with their animals, or what other needs too? Just kind of give us a snapshot of all of that evolution.
Yeah, exactly. So it has been different, and like in the beginning, we went with a lot of food and medicine. But then after a few weeks, they set up these refugee camps in Poland. Most people were insecure if they could actually bring their pets, because most of them didn't have like, the documentation that they needed to cross the border, like in normal cases. And they weren't sure, like, would they be able to cross with their animals, because the law, like, would it apply, or would they like have some exceptions? So they set up an animal station at the train station where all of the trains coming out of Ukraine was reaching. It's in Przemyśl. I learned that after being there like 8 times. Przemyśl in Poland. So actually, when they are doing their passport control, after that, they're free to go into Poland, or get a bus, or get the next train, or whatever they need. But most people were hiding their pets. Like, it doesn't matter how small or how big, because they were uncertain if they would bring them. And, like, we can talk as much as we want if we're a country that's not in war, saying like, okay, of course we would bring our pets. Or maybe some people that don't have pets would say, of course you would not bring your pets. Like, there are many, many attitudes of people that are not in this situation. But the people coming, like, they would like sacrifice everything just to bring their pets. Like, you wouldn't leave family behind, and they didn't. So they brought, their kids and their pet. And I'm sorry, it's just a little bit tough. Yeah, so they really just like, seeing people coming from a war zone. They were both could be like really tired. Like, the train stopped at every bomb alarm. So a train ride that could take like basically half a day could take 2 days, because they had to stop at every bomb alarm. And, they were always like super crowded in the beginning, because everyone needed to get out. No one understood, like, how big is this war? Like, are we safe? Can we get out later? Do we have to get out now? So no one knows anything. They just pack like, whatever they need. And they bring their pets, because yeah, that's family. And they come there, and we just like, I helped. It was not even like super organized. It was just like lots of people like me who just felt the need to help or do something, who was just like putting up these like animal points where we would provide anything that they need, because you can't bring the their dog's bed. You can't bring their food. You can't bring their toys. You can't bring their stuff. You just put them on a leash and go. But most of them, they were hiding their cats in backpacks, and they were hiding their dogs in like big bags. You can like sort of tell when they're pushing them that something was moving inside, that they were trying to hide it. So, we started asking like, do you have a pet? And they would be really, really scared. And we, after we said, okay, we want to help. Is it hungry? Does it need water? And they were like super relieved. Like they were crying. We were crying because, they realized that they could bring their pet. They had to go to another station there where they get their rabies shots and their documents, so that they could enter the country as safe as it gets when it's a sort of exceptions to every rule. So they got their papers for their animals, and we gave them everything that they needed. So basically, one big thing is that when we were sending like animal food into Ukraine, we brought the big bags. Like if you go to a shelter, they have big bags of food. But when we were going to the train station, we brought the small bags of food because no one can carry around 20 kilos. So that was also like one of the things that, okay, like we really have to think about what is necessary and how is it possible. And, children were like, that was like one of the most hard thing for me, except like seeing like lots of, I think most animals were like super tired and a little bit traumatized and very shut down. Like, you can sort of tell that, everything was super stressful, like so many people and so many things happening in a long train ride, and everything. People were stressed, crying. So you can sort of tell that the animals, they didn't have like any capacity to handle anything anymore. So they would just like shut down. And also the children were actually the same. Because, you cannot enter a train station without some child laughing, someone's crying, someone's yelling, someone's singing. And, there was just like people coming with their children and with their dogs, and they were just like saying nothing. Like there was no sound. It was like super quiet. And that was like very, you don't think about it back there because, you kind of have like a job to do. You're there to help and you go to ask them what they need and stuff. But like afterwards, you be like, you come home and like no one was crying. No one was barking. Like, well, they were so like shut down. And who knows what they've been through. Like we weren't asking questions. We weren't there to ask questions, even if some people told us. But the only thing that like made the children really happy was when their pets got help. Like, that kids they do have like the empathy, like purest one. So the only time I saw them like laugh or like be really happy was when we could help their pets. Like, okay, I see you have a hamster. Does your hamster need a little toy, or like, do you want this little cage for it? And they were super happy. And, they got like this for cats. Maybe they just brought it like in a bag or something, and we gave them a cage and maybe like a harness that had little wings on it, so it looked like a like a little cartoon, and that just made them like so happy. Not just the children, also the adults, of course. But they brought their pets. Like some child even brought their pet frog, like so like in like a Pringles tube or something like that. So it's you just grab what you can and you run. So yeah, basically we were there to just like help in what kind of like acute need they have of stuff, food, water.
I can't imagine for those people and for you too, just kind of observing that trauma over and over again, how difficult that must be. I was going to say must have been, but must be, because this is all still happening. You shared with me when we spoke before a story. You told me a story before about, I believe it was the first time that you all maybe, and I could have this wrong, but I think it was the first time maybe you had actually rescued some dogs from Ukraine. You were working with a gentleman from the States, maybe? Is that, would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah. So Sweden has quite a strict laws to bring dogs here. So we couldn't rescue dogs from Ukraine and just bring them back to Sweden. So that was not an option for us because most dogs lack the right documentation, and there was exception made, but just for people that actually came with their pets. So we were thinking like, okay, how can we actually help besides bringing like food and medicine and stuff? And we realized, like, when we went to the border, that many of the people that came, it's not that easy coming to a new country. You don't have a place to stay. You might have children or you might have pets, and you have to find some place to stay with your family. And there's no one maybe accepting pet. So some of them, they had to go back into Ukraine after some time, and some had to like travel to the next country or just trying to find a place to stay. And some of them just couldn't bring their pets along. And of course, this was very emotional for them. But some of them were brought to the shelters around in Poland. And obviously some did escape, they come across the border and they got out of the collar or something. So there was a time where the Polish shelters that was probably already full started to get more Ukrainian dogs. So we realized that if we want to help Ukrainian dogs but cannot help them per se, we have to do it like per proxy instead. So we started looking at like helping dogs from the Polish shelters. And as a senior sanctuary, we obviously wanted to see like the oldest dogs. So in the beginning, where we started to help dogs, we took some of the oldest dogs from the shelters and the ones that have been living there for the longest time. So we rescued a few of their dogs so that they could take more Ukrainian dogs. But then after some time, I met in the beginning of the war, like when everyone was there, it felt like everyone was there. I met up with an American guy called Aaron from Planting Peace. He has an organization, a charity, and he was there actually helping people to find housing that accepted animals. So he was just there and like helping people to find a place to stay. And I don't know how we actually ended up meeting each other, but I was like, I'm here, are you there? Should we just like meet up and do something? And by accident, we actually did. So we met up. I had a car and he had some funds. So we just went to the pet stores. We were like looking at the manager, like, we need some trolleys, and he would pick us one trolley. We were like, no, trolleys, like we need a lot of trolleys. So they brought us like like a column of trolleys, and we were like, let's empty the shelves. So we started emptying the shelves down to the trolleys, and like in the midst of everything that's kind of like stressful and heartbreaking, this was just like a fun moment. Like, just imagine, even if it was not wartime, just walking into a store and like, I'll have everything. I'll take it all. So it was actually quite a nice moment for us. So we combined our funds to buy as much as we could and just like fill up the car. And we went to our contacts that had a shelter that was driving into Ukraine every week. So they were like super thankful for all the stuff. And yeah, it was just a super amazing experience. And we were like, okay, well, I'm happy our paths we're meeting at this point, like good luck and everything. And after a few months, he was actually involved in rescuing another person from Ukraine. And this person was living with her mom in one of the seized cities, so that they were not allowed to escape for a long time. I'm not sure exactly about all the details of the story, but this woman was living with her mother in a bomb shelter, and they were offered a place to stay. Like, okay, we'll take you out of Ukraine. Like, we'll rescue you. And they were like, yeah, but no, we won't go because we have rescued like every dog we've seen. Like, people who were dying, we took their dog. People who were like fleeing but couldn't take their dog, we took their dog. Like, this dog had a puppy, like, and there was shelling above us. We took that dog. So they ended up like two people in a basement or a bomb shelter with like 60 dogs, and like they're like, no, this is our babies, we're not going to abandon them, because even like when we didn't eat ourselves, we made sure that they got fed and watered, like, and also like keeping them safe. And I guess that sort of goes both ways. Like, I think the dogs did a lot for them as well when they were scared or feeling like times were not really good. So they told Aaron, like, we're not leaving without them. And Aaron being exactly the person that I am, so he's like, okay, so well, we'll sort this out somehow. We'll bring you and all the dogs. And he found an empty shelter in Poland, and I was like, okay, can I rent this shelter, because we need some place to stay for some dogs. And he got that shelter, so they moved the two ladies with all the dogs to this empty shelter, and also like hired them to care for the dogs. So it was a really happy story out of like everything. But of course, like they couldn't keep 60 dogs on their own, so we needed to find new homes for them. So accidentally we got in touch again and be like, okay, I've got these dogs. We're in a shelter in Poland, like. So we made sure that they got their documentation done and their quarantine time and everything. So that allowed us to rescue Ukrainian dogs. So we went there to the shelter to pick them up, or we went there first to meet them and like choose the dogs and get to know them and everything. And yeah, we met these two ladies. They were only speaking Ukrainian, so we had like a translator. And it was just like super emotional, because they were like, these are our babies. Like they were crying, like they are the world to us. Like, we just want them to like have a good home, like for everything they've been through and everything. And I was kind of scared that, okay, I'm going to bring like super traumatized dogs to Sweden, and this is going to be really hard to find families and to find to like give them a good life after everything that might have happened to them and everything. But as it turned out, they were not super traumatized, which made me really happy. So when I first met them, I was so happily surprised about like the mentality of all the dogs. And I think that was like all like because of these two nice ladies who'd like kept them safe and played with them and like, tried to give them a normal life in a really, really dark cellar, like when they were shelled for like months. So yeah, it was super emotional to be able to help these dogs, actually.
And do I understand correctly, you brought some of them with you? Is that what you're saying, that some of them came back to your sanctuary?
Yes, we brought them home to us, and we were actually trying to see like if they were fit for families, or if they needed to get some rehabilitation, or did I need to work with them, or like what were their needs. Basically, when I met them, I thought that, okay, these are pretty like happy dogs, but you never know what's under the surface. Like, you can meet a new dog and it just behaves because it knows how to properly be around people or something. I was thinking maybe like they would have like extreme noise phobias or something after the bombings. So I thought, okay, let's bring them home just to evaluate them and see like who they are. Are they fit for a family? Like, what do they need? So we brought them here, and as it turned out, they were all ready for families almost. So we had really good homes waiting for them, and yeah, after some time here and they had really good veterinary care in Poland. Like, they made sure that they had everything they needed. So like most of them came here and they were like fit in their body, and they were like, okay, they took the trip here very well. Like when we get the dogs here, we have only like a 4-hour drive, and then we're like on a ferry cabin for the night. So it's quite a quick and nice travel. Like, they sleep in beds with us on the ferry, and most of them are like, well, this is nice. This is comfortable. And, the ferry is loud, which also like makes every other sound disappear. So they were like, okay, this is calm. This is no noises, and the beds are nice. So most of them were just like really like nice to travel with. I was so happily surprised about all of them. So they had a quite nice trip here, and turned out to be not traumatized, like almost whatsoever, which was really, was great.
That is great. I would imagine that there are some dogs, like those dogs, who were no longer able to be connected with their people. But I would also guess that maybe there are some dogs that wind up separated from their people. Have there been efforts going on to try to reunite animals with families, or is that just pretty much impossible to do in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that sort of knows the big scope of the war, and like how people are moving with their animals, and like how they bring them to the borders or crossings with cars, or by foot or by train. That knows that dogs, or especially cats as well, that they will escape, and will be searched for by their owners, of course. Shelters usually have like a pretty good knowledge of the ones that are left by their owners. Of course, they know, okay, they give them a chance, like find them a better family. Like, we cannot do much for them. But I think also, like, there were some, I would say, bigger organizations that just like, they would like come in for, I guess, a little bit the great PR out of it, and just like scoop out every dog from small towns, and just be like, okay, we rescued them, we'll bring them to a shelter in whatever country that was nearby. And sometimes they actually brought people's pets. So it's not a very wise idea to just like go into a city and just like scoop their dogs, because they need rescue, because some of them actually had owners that started looking for them. And of course, like, some could maybe be found, but it was like impossible to trace it. So basically, like, what we felt was that, okay, if we were going to rehome dogs from Ukraine, we need to know like their story, because we don't have like a great system where you can search for like their ID number or something, even if they have one, because the countries are not like you cannot find this type of information even if you try. So basically, you have to make sure that you just don't bring someone's pet with you without knowing that that's fine. So that was the good part about helping the dogs that these two people were getting, because they knew exactly the story of every dog, and they knew exactly where they lived before the war, which one was their owner, and what happened to them and everything. So that was pretty calming for me to know, okay, these dogs are left to be like responsible with these ladies, and they give the responsibility to me. So yeah, and I mean, there are like Facebook groups and everything where they are posting like missing dogs, missing cats. So I guess some might be reunited by the efforts of like, people in general that live close by or something. But that's also like something that you have to be like wary of, that some organizations, I mean, they do a good job, but it can turn out really bad. Like it has happened that they just brought someone's dog. And I mean, that would be even more traumatizing, I guess, if you're a pet owner and your dog is just like missing and going to another country and you cannot even trace it. So yeah, really important.
Well, I think that everybody had thought and hoped that this war would be over, well, would have never started, but would have been over a long time ago. And yet here we are, with things still not settled. What does that look like for you? You're getting ready to start your 10th trip, I believe, to Ukraine to help. What does this trip look like compared to that first trip when you set out on your own to do this, and how have things changed? What are the needs today?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I guess people still care, but I think it's also hard to care for such a long time because, I mean, it wears people's emotional cup. Like, you know, I mean, I'm a super emotional person myself. Like, I cannot watch suffering without crying by myself, and I cannot really deal with it without feeling like, okay, I haven't done anything. What can I do? Like, and you know, you cannot end the world suffering by any means. I mean, there are always going to be like someone suffering somewhere. So at least like feeling that you're doing something about someone makes a big change. But I can tell like after maybe our 5th journey, like where I was having a really hard time finding my house because of all the donations that was inside and all the sorting that was done. Because, you know, we took everything out like bit by bit and we put them in new boxes, and we labeled them in both Polish language and Ukrainian language so that no one had to like do the work for us. They would just had to receive the help and be like, okay, this is what we have. So we did like a big sorting job like every month. And I think in the beginning I left pretty much every 3rd or 4th week. So I had some time to collect all the donations, and it was quite easy. Like I could decide like today being like, okay, I'll leave in 3 weeks and I'll book the ferry, no problem. And I knew that I was going to get like my car filled up. But now, like after the summer, I think people, you know, they go on with their lives, they go to their holidays, and they spend some time maybe outside the media and everything. And they kind of, I don't think people forget about it, but you know, there are other things like coming. So now we had like our last trips have been really hard to fill up our donations, which is why we cannot do them as regularly now. So this last trip, when I planned it, I had 2 months to just like fill my car, which is really like different from the beginning when it took like 4 days. And I was like, stop it, you cannot send me more stuff. So yeah, it's really hard nowadays. And I mean, I try to do as much as I can, and I still like try to drive around and call people and ask people to send stuff, but it's really slow actually. But then again, like every time I go, I'll be like, does anyone want to send donations? Does anyone want to do this? Like, and we sort of make it in the end, but it's hard. And now this time, of course, the need is different because of some of the cities are newly liberated. That was currently like you cannot reach them before. So there is a big need for like all the medicines and stuff that they couldn't get hold of for a long time. And we also sent not just like any food that people would like bring us. We usually collected a lot of like veterinary graded food because like even if we cannot bring medicine to all the suffering dogs and cats, at least like there were probably a lot of stress and you know, like that's gonna like pan out on their gastro needs. So we brought a lot of that kind of type of food just to help them out in the ways we could. And we still try to do that a lot. And when we reach our destination, like we leave the donations still to people that goes into Ukraine, because it will be like hopeless for me to try Like I'm not too, my life doesn't let me be like totally into what needs to be done to enter a war zone or where to go or everything. So I still leave the things with the people that have done this a lot of times. So I know that everything is going to get to the right places and stuff. And usually we just empty our cars at them. And if people send more donations, we go to the nearest pet shop and we be like, let's go empty the shelves. As long as the money is there, like we will just like use it all up, because you never know like what happens tomorrow. We're not going to save anything for next week. We just go there and leave everything we have and just like fill the car again until the funds ends, pretty much.
And how do you know what the needs are inside? Like, are you coordinating with people, other rescue people who are actually in Ukraine? Those are the people who are taking the supplies and distributing them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's different. Sometimes it goes to shelters that provide food for local people, so that they can come and like bring their own small bag and they can get food and stuff. And sometimes it goes to rescues itself that maybe has been out of food for a long time and stuff. So yeah, basically my contacts and my network within both Ukraine and Poland, they have sort of the scope of like what is needed right now and where. And also, you know, both them and I need to be like really aware of the situation, like because sometimes like, you know, we plan to, okay, this part is going to Zaporizhzhia or whatever, and then the next day they start bombing that place and you'll be like, okay, let's not do that. So it's just like a meticulous planning, like from day to day. Like you can never say what to do in a month's time or even in like 3 days time, because I guess that's like the war thing, that we cannot be sure of anything in this situation.
I'm just really struck by the importance of strong networks and collaborating with other people in all over the place, kind of in real time. Like you're saying, it changes from moment to moment in order to help people and spread those massive ripples like you are doing. For people who are listening who would like to help, what can they do instead of just bringing random items to your house?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's really important what we just talked about, because I mean, people mean really well, but it can really be like not helpful at all if people would be like just going by their own head. Which is happening a lot, and that just makes like we cannot create ripples where people have to, like in a war zone, like do more work than necessary. Like we have to provide them with something that's really easy and accessible, and not just do stuff because we want to, pretty much. So sometimes people ask me like, okay, I want to do the same that you did. Like, can you just give me an address? Like, no, I will not do that. People cannot just like go, because it's very close, like from Sweden to Poland. You could pretty much just like get into your car and go tomorrow. It's just a few hours drive. And people did that, but they would ask me like, what address can I leave this stuff? And I would be like, no, that's not how it works. Like, I don't want to send like stuff from Sweden that no one asked for and that no one needs. So I was like, it's harder than that. Like, it's like the planning is super meticulous. Like, you have no idea. Like the last days before going, it's like so much planning that there's like no sleep at all. And basically people from all over the world, they send messages being like, how can I adopt a dog from Ukraine? And I know that they all mean well, but there are suffering dogs everywhere. Like, go to your local shelter, help a dog out if you really want to help a dog. Don't try to bring one from the other side of the world. Rather help like local shelters. Like, if you really want to help dogs, like help the local shelters in Poland, or like shelters like I have that can do work here. Don't try try to find an airplane for one dog. Like it's hard to say it's not going to make a difference, but you can still make a difference. Like get your dog from a local shelter. Like that would be the first thing to do. And just like do your homework about the organizations that are actually there, because there are so many scams going on. Like people would just steal pictures. They've stole pictures from me, from my contacts, and they would just put them up as their own. Like, yeah, we've been here and we've done that, and this is my cat, and we would be like, but that's my cat. It's sitting in my lap. And it's crazy. So like people should be aware of like new accounts, like make sure that they have a history. We always do live. So when we go there, we do live. When we leave the stuff, we do live. When we meet the dogs, we do live. Like every time we do something massive, like we make a live show just so people can see that we are here. These are your stuff. Your stuff will be brought to the right place and it will go into Ukraine, and we will send updates about that. So people need to do their like homework, and even like the big organizations, like make sure that they actually do it right, for sure. But yeah, people, if they're local, of course, they can ask people like me to bring stuff, but they also have to do some thinking by themselves. Like, I don't know how many, like I had a big box full of hairbrushes for dogs, and I'm like, what person with bombs over their heads will be thinking, I need to brush my dog? Or like fleeing with them, like as refugees, be thinking like, oh, my dog really needs a brush today. Like, so people's generosity can sometimes be really like, yeah, it's not really well thought through sometimes. So yeah, like make sure that if you want to bring stuff, like make sure that it's something that someone will actually need. And we also got we asked for medicines that could be out of date, because that was fine. But like food, we got food that people didn't check. It was like moldy. So now we don't accept like open bags. So just don't get ahead of yourself and be thinking like, what do I have in my cabinets? Let's just send it all, because that's rarely going to work out. But just find the local ones. And I mean, there's a great network with people like helping people. And actually, I was kind of surprised to see now, like a year later, that on the station where we was at the train station in Przemyśl, they actually closed it a few months ago. So that's why we're not going there anymore, because there were not enough refugees coming to keep it open. So it was just too few pets coming. So they closed it. So we cannot go there anymore. So you have to like just stay updated all the time. And like if you follow like organizations like myself, you can sort of see that there's updates coming that might change. And that's not a bad thing normally. That's like, okay, this organization is updated of what's happening and what's needed and everything. So
am I correct in assuming that if people wanted to help and they wanted to reach out to you specifically to help in the efforts that you're doing, that maybe cash donations would be the way to go? Or what kind of, what could people do if they hear this and they're moved by all the work that you're doing and they want to help? Could people donate to you in some way?
Yes, of course. Money, it's going to get us a long way. And we always make sure that if someone is donating for Ukraine, it's going to Ukraine and not maybe to like general rescue or anything. So we have like a PayPal account set up, which is donations for Ukraine. And I guess you will post a link, but it's also like you can send it to like info@ Black Dog Foundation. And since we're in Sweden, it's not .com, it's .se. So that's our PayPal. And I mean, your money is also like going to, maybe it's not like, okay, I need to buy food, or like this needs to go here or there. It's just like, how can we help Ukraine in the best effective, like how can we help the most right now? So any money that people donate towards Ukraine, we will collect them all and just like make sure that they end up where they need to be at this precise moment. And even if it's also like in rescuing dogs or rescuing like people, refugees, like giving them stuff that they need for their pets, like it's going to go to someone that actually needs it.
I think that's so important important and just, goes into everything that you've been talking about, too, as far as we do all, when we see suffering in the world, I think that most everybody wants to help in some way, but it's important to be thoughtful about how we help. And sometimes the best way to be helpful is to rely on somebody else in our network who maybe has more information about a specific thing. And you seem to have the information on this for sure. Thank you so much for all the work that you have been doing there. Tell us a little bit about your next trip. You're getting ready to leave. Your car is full of donations. Is that right?
Yeah, we actually packed it today, so I'm sort of sore in my back because we've been packing like 1 ton of food, and we have medicines, and we had operation material because some of the donations this time is actually going to the earthquake victims in Turkey. So they reached out. It's the same organization that will drive both to Ukraine and to Turkey, and they said, okay, we might need this kind of material for veterinary care. So we got that for this trip. So that's a little bit different. But yeah, we're leaving in a few days in this weekend, actually. And this time we will bring back actually a dog and 5 rabbits. Curiously enough, but that's what happens when I'm involved in something. People will be like, can't you just, yeah, sure, whatever, we will sort it out.
Oh, will they be coming back with you?
Yes.
Okay. I hope that I maybe get to see some pictures of them.
Of course.
Oh, well, thank you so much for everything that you've shared today and all the work that you're doing. And we will, I think you said it was, I can't remember, blackdogorganization.se?
Yeah, blackdogfoundation.se.
blackdogfoundation.se. We will link to that in the show notes as a place that people can send donations if they would like to. How else can people get in touch with you, reach out to you, find out more about the work that you're doing with the sanctuary, the behavior work you're doing, anything like that? How can folks find you?
Yeah, I think the most updates we do is on Facebook. I guess you can search for Black Dog Foundation because that's the first 3 words, and then there are Swedish words. So it's senior sanctuary. The next word in Swedish is senior fristad, but yeah, I guess you can find it actually by the first 3 words. And we do a lot of live shows, and we follow our dogs, and we follow all the needs. And obviously, you're going to see all the cute dogs here that are like between 12 and 19 years old here at our sanctuary. They are mostly in our cute Facebook posts. But yeah, we will do live shows, and we will tell about it when we plan our next trip and how to help and everything. So yeah, I guess that's a really good place to be on Facebook. And of course, you can follow us by our webpage, even if that's not like the most live place to be. But there are a lot of information, and we also have like a link to English version of our website, so you can actually read it in English or just use the normal translator in your in your app.
Very good. Thank you. And we will link to all of that in the show notes as well. Sandra, thank you so much. Is there anything before we wrap up here? Is there anything that you would like to say that you haven't had a chance to say yet? Any more information that you want to add, or have we covered it all from your perspective?
Well, I think we covered mostly from the perspective of me having a sanctuary and working with the vulnerable dogs. But as a dog trainer, I would like to add, mostly because of like how surprised I was at the dogs from Ukraine that were not super traumatized, that one thing we use a lot here as well is not like we don't like particularly train dogs to be not fearful, or it's not like a training plan. But what we try to do is we have lots of different ways to play with dogs, like because play is like the best vaccine towards fears. And that's something you can actually really see in these 60 dogs that came from a bomb shelter in Ukraine. Luckily, they brought in some puppies. They were not like traumatized yet. They tried to play with the other other ones, and they play with the people, and they were actually not scared dogs after this experience, which is super amazing. So that's just like one thing as a dog trainer. I would just like to okay, I've said my stuff on the dog training bit as well because of the podcast general guests that you have, but really just like finding ways to play with your dogs. And even if they don't know how to play, especially like dogs living in shelters for like years and years and years, they don't know how to play, but you'll find ways. And I usually say that like you don't need to like make a dog laugh, but try to find ways to make them giggle. And I think that works a lot for these type of dogs. And I'm just so happy to see them in their new homes, and they are happy dogs. They're like, you can't really tell what their previous life was about, but they are truly blessed to like just end up in loving families after all they've been through. And I'm just so thankful for these two wonderful Ukrainian ladies who just never gave up on like all the dogs in their own city and be like, okay, we're just going to rescue them all and treat them as our family, and we won't leave without them. I mean, just the greatest thanks to them and Aaron for like rescuing them. It's just, I'm in awe for what they did for the dogs.
And are you able to keep up with those women at all?
I don't know. Actually, it's just an amazing story. Like,
yeah. You're able to follow the dogs a little bit.
Yeah, of course. We meet the dogs, and we find their stories, and we update our followers like on their adventures. And I'm actually going to see one. I'm going to keep them here for a dog boarding in a few weeks. So of course I let them come back when they need, so I can totally selfishly be able to see all the dogs and see all the progress they made.
That is amazing. And not just because you can, I'm sure because emotionally, from an emotional standpoint, you want to see them and remain connected in that way. But it's also just really interesting, too, I would think, to think about their lives and where they came from and the time that they spent from you and the little beings who they are now. And how wonderful that you said you would never guess that they had come from a bomb shelter, right?
Yeah. And it's also like, so I mean, I almost started crying like 4 times during this hour, and it's like super emotional, like everything we've done, but it's also like hard to have something to grab onto beside the stories and memories, because you go there, you do your job, and you see things, you hear things, like that's hard to take in as a human being. Like you cannot like imagine someone going through the stuff that I've heard of. And just like by having a few rescued dogs from Ukraine, that's actually something like tangible for me to be like, okay, we've done something. We have at least made. And I mean, also like maybe their owners are dead, maybe they're like refugees somewhere, maybe they're returning to Ukraine. So I'm just like, we did there well, and that's something's really good for me. That's super emotional about everything, that it feels like we actually made a difference, and that makes me proud.
Well, I'm glad that you have something tangible that you can look at and see that makes you feel like you have done something. But it is very clear from everything that you have shared today that you have done a massive amount of amazing things and just spread a lot of ripples. So thank you so much from myself, on behalf of ATA, on behalf of everybody listening today. Thank you so much for sharing with us today and for all the work that you've done for these people and animals.
Oh, thank you so much.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.